According to the seller of this B450 Gaming Plus board from MSI, there were quite a few people competing to buy it, and at the price of $20, I can easily see why. But was the low price the only reason for this? Quite apparently no, that's not the only reason. Having heatsinks on both the SoC and the core MOSFETs is a pretty big selling point, since it would not limit the choice of CPU coolers to downdraft only models. Taking the heatsinks off reveals the topology used for the power delivery phases, and this is a sight for sore eyes. Somewhat expected, the two SoC phases at the top edge of the board use two MOSFETs for the high side and two for the low side. The core phases, however, provided the same pleasant surprise as with MSI's A310DM Grenade, as they use the same topology with two MOSFETs on the high side and two on the low side. The reason I like this topology is because that when a VRM failure does occur, it is one of the high side MOSFETs that shorts out. Any mechanism to reduce the load on a single MOSFET is welcomed, and this topology helps here. In terms of memory slots, the board comes with 4 for a maximum capacity of 64 GB. And just like the other MSI Gigabyte boards, they are of the latches at both ends variety, thankfully. MSI did have a small slip up when it came to the expansion slots, but this is a minor thing and consists in placing a decorative PCIe x1 slot right under the first X16 slot. That one will be completely covered by a 2-slot GPU, so it makes little sense having one there. The other 3 X1 slots should be usable, and I explain that in a moment. The M.2 slot allows placing drives up to 110mm in length, while the second X16 slot, and I'm using air quotes here, the second X16 slot allows using expansion cards that will not fit in the X1 slots. And while being crossfire capable, I don't see anybody putting anything else there except capture cards. You see, despite it looking like an X16 slot, only the first 4 phases are wired, making it a PCIe Gen 2.0 X4 slot. The 6 SATA headers are well placed, with the top 4 being angled at 90 degrees. Again, this is to avoid interference with longer 2-slot GPUs. The lower 2 headers are straight, but that should not cause any issues with the expansion cards used in the lower slots. With the exception of the 6 fan headers, most of the pin headers are placed on the lower edge of the board. You have the expected front audio connector, followed by the parallel and serial port headers. The first nice surprise comes in the form of the second 12V RGB header, helping with both aesthetics and average FPS. We then have the 14-pin TPM header, one of the many system fans header, and the 2 USB 2.0 headers for the front panel. Also on the bottom edge, one can find the USB 3 header and the 2 front panel pin headers, with FP2 being used to drive a debug speaker or a buzzer. But if a PC speaker is not your thing when debugging post errors, then the Easy Debug LEDs should provide you with the information you need to get your build running. There are a few other pin headers that are worth mentioning. The JBAT one used to reset the BIOS, the first 12V RGB header located at the top right corner of the board to make wiring RGB components easier and for another FPS boost, and an SPI header placed next to the BIOS chip, allowing you to reprogram it by using an external programmer and without desoldering the chip off the board. The rear I/O has the first pleasant surprise in the form of a BIOS flashback button. The FAT32 formatted stick that would carry the BIOS file would then be placed in the USB slot right next to the button. For user input, one can use the PS2 port, but more likely you'll be using the 2 USB 2.0 ports under it. You then have 4 more USB 3 Type A ports and your typical 1 gigabit Ethernet port. In terms of video outputs, you'll have to settle for either DVI-D or HDMI. No analog output here, I'm afraid. The audio available is identical to the one used with the B450 Tomahawk. Same codec, same 3.5mm 6 jacks, and thankfully the same performance on the microphone input. Have a listen. This is for the B450 Gaming from MSI. Rear audio, volume 100%, preamp 0 dB. The BIOS experience is basically the same as with the other MSI boards we reviewed. No frills, maximum functionality. You do get control over the CPU multiplier in increments of 0.25, which then translates into frequency steps of 25 MHz. Not a big fan of this feature, but others might be. I do like having controls over the voltage sent to the CPU, VCore especially. A 100mV undervolt can do wonders in terms of dissipated power, longevity of the CPU, and the behavior during boost. I have seen instances when all 6 core of my Ryzen 5 3600 reached 4.2 GHz. You have full control over the system RAM, whether it's to set an XMP profile or if you want to tweak every clock frequency and timing. I typically just set an XMP profile. Now, overclockers will be happy to see that their OC profiles can then be saved to an USB stick, so that if one needs to reset the BIOS, you would not lose the 1 hour of tweaking done previously. Just make sure to save often. Both TPM and rebar settings are also accessible through the setup utility. You need to keep an eye on the former if you plan to use Windows 11, while the latter is crucial when using an Intel GPU. I found that using Auto for the fan type would properly detect the DC fan I use when testing, which is a nice touch. Otherwise, the fan controls are pretty straightforward. You get to manually specify a few data points of fan speed percentage versus temperature, and that's your fan curve. I like this board. Solid VRMs, 2 performance boosting RGB headers, and a familiar looking BIOS that supports all generations of AM4 Ryzen CPUs. The audio is on par with the B350 I currently use, so the B450 Gaming Plus is one of the better candidates for replacing the older Tomahawk. But that would mean losing the old PCI slots, and it's not like I really need to upgrade. The previous owner decided to part with it because of system instabilities, and without a clear diagnostic, the seller decided to get rid of it for $20 USD. The most common price for such board is around $50 to $60, at least in my side of the world. So, there you have it, a solid B450 board making AM4 a platform very difficult to let go of. But as good as the board is, this video still has to come to an end. Thanks for watching, I hope you liked.